It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Ray Estefania. Ray is a psychotherapist, a therapeutic and educational consultant, and an interventionist at R&A Therapeutic Partners in South Florida. His previous role was co-founder and executive director of Family Recovery Specialists, which was an outpatient treatment program and therapeutic consulting practice, which he sold in July of 2018. He has been treating addiction and mental health issues for almost 30 years and was formerly the director of South Miami Hospital's Adolescent Addiction Treatment Program. He has worked extensively with adolescents, adults, and the family members who have been impacted by substance use disorders and mental illness. Ray works locally, nationally, and internationally and will travel to help a family or individual. What made this interview a little bit extra special is because we dove a little bit deeper into the intervention process and what families ought to look for. So just side note, this is not just Ray's story, but it's a little bit educational. So let's get to the interview now with Ray on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Ray, thanks for being a guest on the podcast. It's good to see you.
You too, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
I feel like I haven't seen you in a while.
It has been a little while.
Well, I'm excited to have you as a guest on the podcast, and I'm especially excited because we're going to dive into a little bit of a spin-off in this particular episode, because one of the hats that you wear professionally is something that we're going to elaborate more on for parents that are listening. So that's the tease, right? You don't know what it is just yet. I mean, obviously you and I know, but people that are listening don't know just yet. So let's start from the beginning. Why don't you tell our listeners, where did you grow up and what was the information that you were hearing about what you were supposed to do after high school?
Great question. Well, so I grew up in two different places. My parents were divorced when I was a child. I was probably 8 years old. And so mom moved to Miami and my dad moved to the DC area. So I grew up kind of in both places. Oh, my parents were professionals. My mother was a banker. My dad was an actuary and an economist. So I knew that I was going to go to college and I was going to be some sort of professional. That's just what was going to happen. But you know, Joanna, I struggled as a teen and I struggled as a young adult. And so it wasn't, I didn't sort of take the conventional path. And so, you know, I thought I was going to grow up and be an attorney. I've sort of flirted around with the idea of being a doctor. And I did a little bit of work as a paralegal for a little while when I was a young adult. But after I graduated college, I went to University of Florida, go Gators. I ended up basically getting a job in a hospital-based addiction treatment center in Bethesda, Maryland. I was volunteering there. And I think the reason I chose that is I finally decided that I wanted to be in some sort of a helping field. And my degree in college was in psychology. And so I got this job at this addiction treatment program and I started volunteering there. And then I ended up working there. And here I am 30 years later, and I've done a whole lot of stuff since then. So, you know.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say, it's funny how it all just like works out, right? Like you think you're going to do one thing and gosh, life is never conventional. No. So I love hearing a little bit of that, like the linear path. Honestly, even geographically starting as early as 8 for you of like, okay, culturally, DC is way different than Miami. Yeah. So like going back and forth and then having these kind of expectations or grand plans about what I think I'm going to do, what I'm supposed to do. And so obviously a lot has played out, like you said, in the last 30 years. So why don't you are you okay just kind of giving us the rundown? What do you do right now? Yeah. Like what is your title? What's your role? How can people connect with you?
Okay. I am a clinician. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've worked in a lot of programs. I've run programs. I've even owned and operated a program. But right now, I'm a partner in a company called R&A Therapeutic Partners. My partner is Anna Moreno. She and I run the company together. And we essentially do therapeutic consulting, educational consulting. We do interventions for families that are concerned about someone who may be dealing with a drug problem or a mental health issue or a combination of these. We do case management. We do crisis management. We basically just help families who don't know what to do. They're trying to help their loved one. They don't know how to manage the problem. We come in, provide guidance, and try to lead them toward the appropriate resources. I mean, that's essentially what we do.
And you guys are based in Southern Florida still, right? In Miami?
Yeah, that's correct. We're based in South Florida. We have an office in Miami. R&A Therapeutic Partners operates out of an office in Miami, an office in Delray Beach. I say primarily we work with folks in Florida, but we also work with folks across the country and even families internationally. So being in Miami, we're sort of the gateway to Latin America and to the Caribbean. And so we work with families in those, Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and other countries as well.
Yeah. So even though you're place-based, your clientele is not. And so that's where the reach.
That's correct.
Okay. So if you're okay with it, I want to actually dive into specifically talking about interventions.
Okay. Sure.
How do you feel?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
I feel like we've had multiple conversations about this, like as a sidebar, because oftentimes, some people that work in this like therapeutic consultant role, some people kind of also are interventionists, or some that are not are referring families to interventionists. And this is where we can get really vocal about who is an appropriate interventionist, right? Like what makes somebody qualified to do like that work that's necessary for a client. So let me back up. For people that are listening, they might have an idea of what an interventionist is, but I'm just going to ask you, how do you describe what an interventionist does?
That's a great question. So I consider myself a problem solver, and I don't consider myself an interventionist as much as I do a therapeutic consultant who also has some intervention skills. And so I'm a clinician first and foremost, and I view everything I do through a clinical lens. Unfortunately, there's not an easy definition for what intervention is. In fact, there's not even really a credential necessarily for interventionists. It's a little bit tricky because anyone can call themselves an interventionist, just like, similarly, anyone could call themselves an educational consultant or a therapeutic consultant. There's no real defined requirements. That's why we have organizations like TCA and others, even intervention organizations that try to sort of, create some guidelines, right? And some requirements and some credentials. And so I would say that first and foremost, there are interventionists out there who are also clinicians and who have a clinical background. And who have higher education and higher training. I didn't just go take some 2-week course and then call myself an interventionist. I have 30 years of experience in clinical settings, running, managing, working with clients directly in programs. And I think that puts me in sort of a unique place to be able to help families solve problems and find resources. And the thing that's different between a consultant and an interventionist, a consultant helps families find resources, right? And helps match a client's needs to resources. And that's great. But what about when you have a client who doesn't want to get help? Doesn't want to go to treatment, isn't prepared to accept the help that's being offered? The interventionist comes in and guides a process where hopefully through working with the family, we can encourage that person to recognize the problem and hopefully accept some help. And that's where there's certainly a lot of overlap between educational therapeutic consultants and interventionists, but there's also some differences. And that's probably the main difference is is that we don't just identify the resources they may need, we figure out how to get them there.
Mm.
And I think that's what makes us a little different. Now, I'm not one of these interventionists that flies all over the country, and there are people who do that. I have a family. I'm very busy in my practice here in South Florida. So, I sort of take my consulting hat and then my intervention skills, and I guide families, and I'm pretty successful at helping families create a situation where their loved one will accept treatment. And sometimes I have to be there to do that. I will tell you that with COVID, we actually learned how to do interventions virtually because none of us were going anywhere, right, during COVID. And so we had to pivot, and we had to actually learn how to coach families virtually, never seeing the client, never being there physically present. And we were pretty successful at getting people to accept treatment without having to actually be in the room physically.
Wow. Can I ask you a specific question about that? Because this is how I feel, and I wonder if it translates for you. Like pre-COVID, right? Pre-pandemic, I was actually pretty vocal against telehealth. I just felt like it was not effective, especially when we're talking about specific issues that clients are working with. Like in my mind, again, naive, not seeing what was on the horizon, like when we have the ability to meet in person, why would we not, right? And for me, it just felt like if you're behind a screen, there's a lot that you're missing in that therapeutic relationship. Now, I'm curious, and this is why I'm asking you this pointed question. Did you have a similar feeling about any type of people that were facilitating interventions or doing kind of the family work, getting that stage of change, the readiness, the parent coaching, the family work, doing it like virtually or like over a screen? Or did that even exist?
Like prior to the pandemic?
Yes.
I don't think that was really happening prior to the pandemic. And I will tell you that I had the same sort of bias or feeling that you did around what virtual is and how it could be effective or not. I still do to some degree. I still don't believe that virtual is a replacement for in-person. And I do believe that a lot of the work that we certainly do and you do as well, is sometimes better done in person. But I think virtual's here to stay. I don't think it's going away. I think we all need to get accustomed to it and learn how to utilize it as another tool. Like I work with families in placement that are in Arkansas, right? I don't need to fly to Arkansas to help somebody find resources and get their teen or their young adult into treatment. So virtual has been very helpful in that way. If I'm doing an intervention, I'd rather do it in person. I think I have a better chance of that being successful. But COVID forced us all to think out of the box and to do some things differently. And I think it's a tool that we can use to our benefit, but I don't think it's a tool that should replace what we've always done.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, families now have so many more options for getting help. And virtual is a big part of that I found that a lot of families would prefer to do virtual, but I still get a lot of clients that really want to be in the office too and want to have us sit with each other and really get to know each other and be in the room together. And I still think there's an advantage to that. I really do.
Yeah. Yep. We need human connection, even if it's like not physically touching, but just being in the same space, breathing the same air. It's necessary.
We really, and so many of our young adults, Joanna, that you and I see are missing human connection. They're not even leaving their room.
Yeah.
They're just completely paralyzed and their world has become so small. And I think that's part of the problem of why we're seeing all these mental health issues with all these teenagers and young adults.
Well, and I think this is like another follow-up question that I have for a clinician who uses intervention skills through the process of working with your clients and the families. we've also seen a shift in less substance use. Not saying it's going away, but I think that like using intervention as an intervention in itself was really targeted towards just addiction treatment. But now it's really shifted towards like that broader scope of,
That's true.
hey, I have the young adult who is not leaving the home. They're isolated. They're so disconnected. Maybe there is some substance use, but it's not at that like moderate or even severe level of use. It's just they're disconnected. So can you talk about maybe are you seeing that kind of in your work in helping families get the young adult out of the home?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true. And I would say that our client now is more, it used to be more primary substance with some mental health stuff sprinkled in. Now it's kind of more primary mental health with some substance use. And they're still very much connected and related and intertwined. But it's become more challenging because you're right, intervention has always been really targeted at primary addiction, substance use issues. We've had to kind of learn how to adapt the models of intervention to more primary mental health issues. And I will tell you that the clients that we're seeing that are dealing with sometimes, serious and persistent mental illness, they don't respond necessarily to the same approaches that we might have used with someone who was more primary substance. So we've had to become a little more sophisticated, much more clinical, and we've had to really adapt what we're doing to a more primary mental health person who is suffering with more mental health issues. And that just means that sometimes it takes a little longer. It's more of an ongoing process. Intervention has never really been an event. It's more of a process, but now it's even more of a process. And sometimes it takes longer to get someone to come out of the room and to, and we've got parents, right? And you know this as well as I do. We've got parents that are so paralyzed with fear that they're going to do something to upset their young adult or their loved one and send them over the edge. And God forbid they do something to hurt themselves or something, that they're just afraid to do anything. And so getting families to sort of take back their power and realize that they can influence things. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but you've got to push and you've got to challenge, because that person isn't going to change without help. And we got to get them out and get them into the right kind of help. And so it just takes a little more finesse. And certainly it takes someone who has experience and is trained in dealing with complex mental health issues and complex family systems.
Yep, totally. I think that just reinforces the need for, if you feel like as a family, you've pulled out all the stops trying to get your loved one the help that they need and they're resistant, then it's not just, I need to go hire, quote unquote, hire an interventionist. What you need is a clinician that has those intervention skills. And like you said, Ray, it's not a single event. This is very much a process, and it's a longer process, because when you're dealing with somebody that's really struggling with mental health issues, it's going to take a while to build that trust.
I mean, let's say you're dealing with a young adult who's in his room and he's been smoking marijuana and now he's become psychotic. And he's not based in reality himself. So our normal intervention methods of trying to just sort of reason with him and maybe use some tough love or some, setting limits, they don't respond to that the way someone might who was dealing with more primary substance issue without the mental health component.
Yeah.
And so it is different. But, there are interventionists out there. There's plenty of them out there. We have some in our Therapeutic Consulting Association, people that are interventionists, but also have strong clinical skills, in many cases, a license, and they are clinicians. And those are the people that I would look to in today's environment when things are really as complex and can be as acute as they are.
Absolutely. Is there any last thing that you would share with our listeners that you would want to impart to them, like maybe what to expect, or just like some little nugget that maybe we haven't talked about specific to this targeted topic?
Joanna, I would just want to try to give people some hope that there is help out there. I feel like parents these days are so overwhelmed by all the information that is available to all of us. They can get on the internet and they can find all kinds of information about lots of different things. That's kind of a double-edged sword though, right? Because they can get a lot of information, but they also get so confused by all the information. And everyone's got an opinion about this and that, and this program is good and that program is good. And they get on the internet and they try to find answers and solutions for themselves, and they just find themselves spinning their wheels. And so what I would really encourage families to do is find someone you really trust, whether it's a consultant, it's a counselor, it's a psychiatrist, someone that's a professional that does this. Find someone you trust and put your faith in them and let them guide you, because it just can be so overwhelming, to find help. And I would say, the other thing I would say is that there is hope and people do get better, but it takes time. And, it's not a marathon. I mean, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And especially when we're dealing with mental illness, the solution is never quick. And so you have to take time, but you also have to trust the people that are trying to help you. I would say as a consultant and an interventionist, that's my biggest challenge these days, is that I find that families aren't as trusting as they used to be, and they question a lot of things. And listen, they should question, and they shouldn't just follow blindly either. But at some point, you got to put your trust in someone, and you got to find someone that knows how to help people that are in your situation. And then you got to be willing to do the difficult work, because this is not easy. Yeah. It's not easy to be a family member who's trying to help someone who maybe doesn't recognize they need help. Yeah. And so that's all I would say, is that find someone that you can really trust to guide you, and don't try to do it alone, because number one, you don't have to. And there's people out there that kind of know how to help folks with these issues. That's people like us. And you just need to just put your faith in someone that can help you kind of walk along the path with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking more specifically about this. I'm going to close out this interview asking one last question, but this is going to be a little bit more personal, so I hope you're okay with it.
Don't get too personal, Joanna.
Of course, not too personal. Knowing obviously your expertise in the work that you do, and just hearing kind of a very brief snapshot of kind of the educational, personal and professional journey leading to the work that you're doing now. Obviously, we didn't dive into a lot of those, like what you did in between in those 30 years getting up to where you are. So I'm just going to put this plug out here. If anybody really wants to hear all of the educational or professional paths that Ray took leading to owning this consulting practice, reach out to him. Links will be in the show notes for you to connect with him, not just to learn about what he did, but just to connect with him, but to potentially learn more and hire him. But all that said, knowing what you've shared, do you see yourself as successful?
I do see myself as successful, and I don't necessarily mean that means monetarily, right? I find success in a lot of ways that, listen, I've made a good living in my life, and I hope to continue to do that, right? But success to me is waking up every morning knowing that I can provide for my family, knowing that I can go into work and help people find solutions, knowing that I'm trying to do what's right for clients, and that I've been around for 30 years trying to do the ethical thing and help people and have integrity in what I do. That doesn't mean everybody's always happy with what I do or agree with what I say, but I try to put my clients first and help them find solutions. And I think that's a definition of success, right? Whatever my legacy is, I'm an old guy at this point. I'm 57 years old. I'm not young like you anymore. But what I will say is, I think people will remember me as someone that has integrity, that did their best to try to help people, and that did what he said he was going to do. And that's been my career, basically. I mean, I've dedicated myself to trying to help families find solutions. And I don't always have the answers, but I do my best to find them if I don't know what they are. And again, we don't always have to have the answers. We just have to have integrity in what we do and remember who we're doing it for and why we're doing it. The client always comes first. The family always comes first. And that to me is a success. That's the definition of a successful career in the helping profession that we're both in. And so, yes, I consider myself to be successful.
Well, Ray, thank you again for being a guest on the podcast, sharing your personal story. Obviously, again, kind of truncated, and definitely appreciate you elaborating more on kind of what interventions look like or what that could specifically be for a family nowadays, especially post-pandemic. And so again, thank you. I know you're super busy, so I appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Joanna. Always great to see you.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. Well, information is everywhere. How do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.